Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo Sam Monson. We're live here on a Wednesday morning. It is running back day. Sam, you ready to rank some NFL draft running backs?
Running back day. Let's go.
Drake Holidays. He's already in the chat. I love Drake. Always good feedback for us over here on Check the Mic. He's got takes. This is his favorite position to scout. Sam, where would you rank running backs in positions to scout?
It depends on the year. So beforehand, if you're sort of going, wow, which position do you really like ranking? Running back wouldn't be one of my top ones. But the more we get into it, the more I'm like, yeah, I do actually kind of like running backs.
Yeah, I think when I get into it, I kind of like it. I always push it off toward the end, though. I think linebacker is my least favorite. I kind of get into that too once I get there. I think what's your least favorite to scout while we're here? Is it linebacker like me?
Linebacker is definitely one of them. I don't like scouting quarterbacks because most of the college quarterbacks are not good, and that angers me. Like, generally speaking, the reason I don't watch college football is because it's just a much worse version of real football, the professional game. And so nothing highlights that more than quarterback play, where you're like, most of these guys are not just bad, but like antagonizingly bad.
You generally complain about quarterbacks, though, when you're breaking down receiver film. When you're trying to evaluate a receiver, you're complaining to me about how bad the college quarterback situation is.
Like, the quarterback play is so bad that it drags down your like analysis of receivers and other positions.
I think I usually push safety off toward the end, but I kind of like watching safeties just because you're trying to figure out how they fit in the NFL because there's a million different answers there. Anyway, we're talking running backs here today. I'm a little disappointed in myself. Last year during running back ranking show, I had haikus ready. No one inspired me into a haiku in this. Maybe on the fly we'll get there.
That's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, my Bucky Irving haiku I think ended up being pretty good last year. Do you want to hear it?
No.
Okay, good. Mug check. Where are you at? The wide mouth again?
No, so it's different. It's the same idea, but so this is where, like, the free Mint Mobile mug is just better, right? This is effectively the same thing, but it's slightly different, and the differences annoy me. It's not as good. Plus, it's like falling to pieces, like the enamel and stuff's chipping off.
Oh, I'll break out my. I got a Harry mug from when he was a baby, and it's kind of sad. His baby pictures are on there, and they're all starting to get, destroyed, starting to get worn down. But yeah, I'm back. Old Faithful. Got my Yeti.
Old Faithful.
I have a backup Yeti, which is a black one. It's not Sport
Good.
Radar, but just doesn't feel as good. Doesn't taste as good in the backup Yeti mug. All right, we ready to go? Running back rankings.
Chat's asking if we have any ownership meeting coverage. No, we don't.
No, we should go to that. I've had friends in the media suggest that we should go to that. If I knew, like, Kay Adams is over there cranking out interviews with absolutely everybody. If I knew we could line up about 20 interviews between owners and head coaches and GMs, I would do it. If I knew we could do that.
I can't think of an NFL, event or get together that we would feel more out of place than the owners meeting. You and me dressed like tramps sitting in the lobby of some like ridiculous hotel resort place somewhere, just hoping that we can talk to a GM, like fist bump it every now and again.
Jerry, can we just get a couple minutes of your time? Jerry.
Just try not to look at all the things we said about you down the years.
All right. This is sight unseen. I haven't seen your rankings. You haven't seen mine.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a little bit. We've exchanged takes, but I'm looking forward to seeing what your rankings look like here.
Yeah. What's your overall assessment of this running back class? It's been generally talked about as an extremely good, extremely deep class. Once you got into the tape and started pulling out top 10 rankings, how do you feel about it now?
Unlike my tight end takes, where I thought the tight end depth is overrated, I think running back is good, man. I think it's a very good running back class. I think what's tricky is my initial opinion was that the second round would be where there would be a run, and you and I just did the second round the other day, and we didn't have that run necessarily because I thought there were some other players available, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is what happens. I think there are starting running backs, or at least running backs who could bring something to the table. The top 6-7 running backs maybe could at least be good, effective, and then bunch of players that didn't make my top 10 that I could picture roles for. So I really like this running back class.
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, you've got a lot of that where there are guys, again, I couldn't fit in the top 10 that if they ended up being like really useful, Bucky Irvings, right? If they ended up being really useful contributors day 3, like transforming running games, it wouldn't shock me at all. Number two, it feels to me a little bit like running back now that almost everywhere is a committee, right? There's so few these bell cow running backs anymore. Now that everything is a committee, it's becoming a little bit like receiver, where it's so much easier to talk yourself into anybody because you can be like, well, here's his role, right? Like now, yeah, there's things he can't do, but there's that space in a backfield committee for this guy, available and ready to go. And look, here's this team that needs that. And you can find 5 spots in the NFL that he fits immediately as, the number 2, number 3 running back on a committee. I'm finding it a lot easier to talk myself into running backs, even with like glaring weaknesses, than I was, a few years ago, where it's like, well, that guy can't play on third downs or can't do this or can't do that. That's a change, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I'm looking forward to seeing the list here. So let's go what we've done in the past. We'll just go through your top 5, and then I'll give my top 5. We didn't really discuss this with Ben, but I think that's how we should do it. You give your top 5, I'll give my top 5, and then we'll go player by player. So you want to kick things off?
Yeah. And so you talk about tiers being an important thing, right? You hate ranking things, hate putting numbers next to them. You like tiers. To me, there are clear tiers in the rankings generally, but certainly in the top 5. Ashton Jeanty is clear running back 1 to me. Boise State, we've talked about him a lot, clear superstar prospect. He's up there with one of the best prospects to come along since however long you want to do it, right? Think of all the elite running back prospects down the last 20 years, Adrian Peterson, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, that tier of people, Zeke Elliott, if you want to throw him in there as well, he was a really, really good prospect. If you kind of think back, he's in that category, right? Basically a flawless prospect as far as it goes. I think he's by far and away running back 1. Running back 2 for me, I think is also pretty clear. I think it's Omarion Hampton. I think North Carolina, athleticism, explosion. I think he's kind of in a class by himself as the second best guy in this class. Running back 3 is where it gets interesting. I think this is really close in the next tier. The next group are extremely close to me. I ended up going with Caleb Johnson from Iowa. On reflection, the more I think about it, the more I'm not sure I love it, but I went with Caleb Johnson. We'll talk about him in a bit. And then 4 and 5, Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, much as I hate that offense for projecting anything. And then Cam Skattebo from Arizona State. Anyway, that's my top 5. What have you got?
As my face lights up with Cam Skattebo, I had a feeling you were going to have Caleb Johnson at 3. I think I got the most feels watching him on film. We'll talk about him in a minute, but he's your 3, Sam. You have to love him. Remember, I know. Let's try to do this honestly here. Let's try not to tear down the top guys to explain, let's try to explain what everybody's bringing to the table and why. So, all right, I have the same top 2 as you. Ashton Jeanty, number 1. Omarion Hampton, number 2. We have 4 out of the top 5, same ones, though. Number 3 for me is Cam Skattebo. I'm going with Skattebo as the number 3 back. I don't care what you people say. He's not Mike Allstott. He's not a fullback. He's running back 3 in this class. I'm going Travion Henderson at number 4 from Ohio State, number 1. I'm going Travion, number 4, and then Caleb Johnson from Iowa, number 5. So, by the way, Dylan Sampson, the only player that you had that I don't have in my top 5, I have him at 6. And so where do you have Travion?
6.
6. Okay. So we have the same top 6 in different order. Yeah. Let's start there. Starting with running back 1, Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. We've just discussed him so much as the blue chip guy, the slam dunk guy. Why is that? What is so good about Ashton Jeanty?
So as I said, it's difficult to find flaws in his game. I mean, he has absolutely unreal contact balance. So he's 5'8", 211 pounds. That gives him an absurdly low center of gravity. Again, this is the caveat we throw out anytime we do rankings or comparisons to anything, right? Forget the overall level of the player. We're comping a specific thing, right? So if you hear references to certain players that are like superstars, it's not saying this guy will be as good as that player. It's saying there's something about his game that reminds me of the other player we're talking about. So Ashton Jeanty, right? Number one, he had the best college season since Barry Sanders. But Barry Sanders was also built like that, right? Extremely low to the ground. Sanders is like 5'8" and 205, 206, something like that. And part of the reason Barry Sanders was so hard to tackle, in addition to being like one of the most elusive players to ever play the game, was the dude who's built so low to the ground. So, think of those highlight reels of like an entire group of the Bears defense converging around him and just like bouncing off. Like when they're so compact and so low to the ground, they are extremely difficult to tackle. He also has this incredible style where he just makes it look easier than anyone I can think of. It just, nothing looks hard. Nothing looks like he's putting effort into it. It's just like he glides from one thing to the next. Guy bounces off and it's like, oh, look, here's a crease. Off he goes. It's really impressive. Like the numbers are obviously insane, like video game numbers. Over 4,700 yards in 3 seasons, 6.4 yards per attempt in his career, 6.9 last year, 5.25 yards after contact per attempt, right? So he's averaging over 5 yards per carry after contact last year, 150 something broken tackles on 375 attempts. To me, like the only concern, red flag, whatever you want to put it, is those volume numbers, right? 375 attempts on its own is pretty insane. 748 attempts in college. He's had a lot of work, and that at a position where we know that generally speaking, that's a thing, wasn't a thing for Derrick Henry ever, but usually there's some real signal in the volume of workload that a guy has had at some point becomes a problem. Ashton Jeanty's had a lot of work already.
That's exactly what I wrote down as a potential concern. 375 carries, you mentioned, 388, including negated plays. It's 40 more than anybody we've seen, in recent years. And so there's not like a previous comp. Show me all the guys with 380 plus carries and how they've translated it in a season. Go ahead.
And also, just quickly, like that, it's also not only is it a huge number, period, right? But it's also above. Remember those sort of thresholds that people used to have in the NFL. Once a guy's hit this amount of work in a single season, next year is like a drop off a cliff, right? Now, it's obviously different going from college to the NFL, but it is notable at least that Jeanty's season last year, independent of like the overall cumulative volume, just last year, his season sort of past the thresholds that used to be like if a running back ever gets those carries in the NFL, next season is almost the inevitable start of his career decline.
Yeah, I don't know if I always trust what those studies were doing. They felt
Exactly.
a little overfit, but the studies were essentially, I think it was Football Outsiders came up with like a magic number for them was like 383 carries, because very specifically, if you had that many, it was like Larry Johnson with Kansas City. Maybe DeMarco Murray hit it one year. There was another name I just had, and I can't remember who it was. But once guys got over that threshold, the next year wasn't as good, and maybe even subsequent years. It is really the only thing. Plus, but it's also his style, too. I mean, when you look at the numbers per PFF, 150 missed tackles forced, it does look like a misprint, right? We're a few years removed. I think David Montgomery was right around 100 or pushing 100. We're like, wow, this guy's incredible. Jeanty's numbers all look fake. Attempts, yards, missed tackles forced, it all looks completely fake.
Yeah, like I said, they're video game numbers. They are it's the best sort of statistical output since that Barry Sanders season where the numbers do genuinely look fake. Like if you showed somebody that Barry Sanders season now with no context and said, did this happen or not? You'd be like, no, that's ridiculous. Of course, he didn't average, 250 yards a game or whatever it was. That's absurd. But like Jeanty, number one, did it. Number two, the Montgomery comp is interesting because they have similarities in terms of Jeanty at 5'8", 211 pounds is extremely difficult to get that clean shot on, right? Compact, small, low to the ground, incredibly skillful, makes those like really subtle, quick movements before getting hit just to avoid getting, again, Sanders again, same thing. Like it was so hard to get a clean shot on Barry Sanders. There were 300-pound, Leviathans on the defensive line that were just like, if I can get one shot at him, I can stop him, right? And you're like, you're never going to get it. You're never, ever going to get that shot on Barry Sanders. Jeanty's the same thing. It's so hard to get the clean hit on him. So, 375 carries or whatever. How many of those, are they the same, right? 375 carries for him versus 375 carries for a Larry Johnson or a DeMarco Murray, guys that carried the ball very differently. I wonder what the sort of cumulative punishment is for his body relative to those guys.
No, I think it's a fair point, Sam. And Drake in the chat knew you were going to say that. He was reciting the same thing, right? He does a fantastic job of not letting defenders get that clean shot. I think his footwork is fantastic to be able to do that. I think he's good at contorting his body to make sure that you're not getting a clean shot at him. Like there's different ways of forcing 150 missed tackles, right? Just to repeat those who don't listen, we're not saying he is exactly like Barry Sanders and or will have the same career as Barry Sanders. You were comparing his low center of gravity.
Right.
There's no, it's not even the same stratosphere as Barry cutting and juking, right? Like the movement is nothing like Barry Sanders. When the comps for me for Ashton Jeanty were the Maurice Jones-Drew, Nick Chubb spectrum, just because I used those two as comps before. I thought Nick Chubb was a bigger version of Maurice Jones-Drew, the way dudes bounced off of him, but with some better big play ability. I think Jeanty has some of that Nick Chubb ability to and this is the comp for me, right? This is what I'm comparing. Nick Chubb for me is really good when there's not good run blocking. He could still get 2 to 4 yards. When there is good run blocking, he could take it to the house, right? Yeah. We've always described Saquon Barkley as when the blocking's not there, he has a lot of 0-1 yard gains, right? Whereas Nick Chubb would turn those into 2, 3, or 4. But if you give Saquon a crease, he takes it to the house. I think Ashton Jeanty's closer to Nick Chubb, where you could still just, on a bad day, say Penn State, you could still find some yards, right? You're going to have, Penn State was absurd. 8-man box, dominating up front. Not saying Jeanty even was great in that game, but he at least found some yards that probably shouldn't even have been there. So I think he could do that, and if you give him a crease, he has the chance to take it to the house, much like a Nick Chubb.
Yeah, the way he plays, you sort of imagine a player that's always trying to bounce it outside, trying to make the play, but he is actually very good at just lowering his head and getting 3 to 5 yards if that's what's available, right? And he finishes runs very well. Like even when the play is definitely ending at this point, he's going to get another 3 to 5 yards just from strength, just determination, just keeping going. He actually is very good at that. Like, this is what's available, get it, and don't get any, and nothing else is on the table. In a way that I think you assume automatically he probably isn't, because of the way that he is very good at kind of cutting and making guys miss and, getting extra yardage that way. I think he is actually pretty good at being efficient in it as well.
And much like Chubb or whoever, I think he's fine in the pass game. I think I'll at least touch on every running back in some level of what they do in the pass game. I think if you just ask Jeanty to run normal running back routes, he'll be fine. I don't know that he'll be the mismatch creator, lining him up all over the formation.
Yeah, I think he can catch. Like, they didn't ask him to do much of it, but there's a play against Oregon, say, and strength of competition is another thing worth at least bringing up for Jeanty, right? Did it at Boise State the whole way, so there are strength of competition concerns, or at least it's relevant, right? But you already mentioned the Penn State game, which is a step up in competition against one of the best teams in the country. Oregon, for most of last season, were like number 1 in the country, right? Arguably the best team. Against Oregon, there's a play where he split out wide, goes up over a guy one-on-one down the sideline, like Saquon Barkley has been able to do in his NFL career. So, I think he can be a factor in the pass game. Definitely. I agree. He's not going to be Christian McCaffrey. He's not going to be that type of running back, but most people aren't. But I think he's more than serviceable as a receiving running back. Pass pro, I think maybe an arguable weakness of him as well, but that's like basically every running back except Travion Henderson. Pass pro is a relative weakness, so I wouldn't put it out there as a problem, right? But I think it's, given what is an almost complete and almost outstanding, if you put it on a spider chart, right? Like, here's all the areas where Ashton Jeanty is amazing. Pass pro would be one of the weakest areas in the spider chart, but the spider chart overall would be, like a circle.
Last thing I want to mention about Jeanty, because again, I think there are those slight concerns, maybe a little pass pro competition issues, right? For whatever that is, I think he solved those necessary, for the most part. The workload thing. I want to talk about the Penn State game really quick, and then just his vision. But Penn State game, you could say, well, they bottled him up, something like 3 yards per carry, whatever it was. He forced like 15 missed tackles in there. And when you watch the film, there was nowhere to run. When there was a little crease to run, he got his 8, 10, 12, whatever it was. Penn State did everything that they could on the chalkboard to stop him, but also they just destroyed blocks. I mean, they have a very good defensive front. They have some guys who are going to get drafted pretty high next year on that defensive line. Penn State did everything they could in the college football playoff to slow down Ashton Jeanty. So I think that's where any running back is like that. If the entire defense decides and wins up front, and we're going to stop this guy, they'll be able to do that. So I'm not going to use that as a knock, but I just want to touch on his vision really quick. I think that's one of the other things that separates him, right? He's tough to tackle. He's definitely tough to tackle if you're even half engaged with an offensive lineman, right? You're just not going to arm tackle Ashton Jeanty all that well. But he's got a really good feel too for when to cut back, for when to bounce outside. He's got a good feel, and I think he could do it across any scheme. He could run downhill duo type plays where you bounce it out, make a big play against a corner. He can run power counter, set up his pullers, and he can run zone where that's a pure vision downhill cut play. I think Jeanty can do it all, which is why he's RB1.
Yeah, the Penn State game, I think, is just a cautionary tale of, remember, running backs are still susceptible or dependent on the blocking in front of them, right? And this is why, how high can we draft a running back? Can we take him at 4, 5, 6? That, to me, that's less of a question than how good is the situation he's stepping into, right? Do you have an offensive line? Do you have a run game already and you just need somebody to come in and maximize it? Or are you asking this guy to come in and effectively replace an offensive line? Like, are you drafting him in lieu of fixing an offensive line that's a problem? If that's the answer, don't draft him, because he can't, like, that shows you running backs are still, like, he'll get yardage and he'll make guys miss and he'll be, productive, but it won't fix it. It won't, you can't invalidate that. Like the Penn State thing, as good as Ashton Jeanty is, he can break 7 tackles on a play, and that play went for like 4 yards or whatever it was, right? You can't replace blocking. If the blocking is overmatched, the guy will not fix the run game, even if he's amazing. You need to have that somewhat in place already. But I think for so the Patriots, right? The Patriots should not draft Ashton Jeanty, regardless of how good they think he is. If they think he's the best player in the draft, they should not draft Ashton Jeanty, because they do not have the situation in place for him to succeed there. Chicago, though, right, who just spent an offseason so far overhauling an offensive line, I think you can start to make an argument then. And I think a lot of the teams that are theoretically in the Jeanty market actually have the offensive line, the blocking in place for him to do well.
I see the chat debating, how do you have vision as a shorter running back? It is, and I like one of the explanations, it is feel. It's reading the blocks. It's not necessarily, you're not too short to see the blocking scheme up front.
I mean, you're not seeing over people when you're running back vision.
But you're reading your blockers in leverage, right? When I started, as you get down the running back list, when I start to put knocks on running backs, it's when they start to bounce outside too soon, right? And then you start to, we'll talk about that later. It's about reading your blockers and knowing when to cut, when to bounce out, when to, cut off the hip of a puller, whatever it might be. Jeanty has a good feel. You could call it vision, you call it feel, whatever it is. He's making the right cuts and getting to the right place more often than not.
It's different. Like, quarterbacks need to see over the line to see receivers 25 yards downfield, right? Every running back in the NFL is shorter than the offensive line in front of them. That's not like how running back vision works. It's, as you say, it's figuring out, like, if you've ever weaved through a crowd, just foot traffic, if you like Fremont Street, right? I got to get from the one end of Fremont Street to the other, like, head down, let's go. It's about understanding the movement of people and figuring out when the gaps are going to open up and like how to go. That's running back vision.
All right, so we both have Ashton Jeanty as running back 1. Good discussion there. Let's get to running back 2. Again, we're both in agreement here. Omarion Hampton from UNC. I know most of the time that I've brought up Hampton, it's been on the negative sense, but I think he grew on me more and more as I watched him. What do you like about Omarion Hampton from UNC?
Yeah, we've already talked about it before. I do have some so we just praised Ashton Jeanty for his vision. I have some concerns about Omarion Hampton's vision, and even then, it's more inconsistent than it is outright bad, right? So I've comped him because of this to DeAndre Swift a little bit, DeAndre Swift is a physically very impressive running back, but who has terrible vision. And that's why he's not a team's number one, superstar, and teams move on from him, et cetera, because he keeps missing the hole. He bottles himself up. He doesn't maximize his own ability to gain yardage, but then every now and again, because he's physically talented, he'll make an amazing run and blah, blah, blah. So Hampton does some of that, where there are definitely plays you're like, you're seeing it wrong. You're going to the wrong hole. You're not seeing the hole open up. Well, all those sorts of things. But number one, he's so physically talented that even on some of those plays, he makes it work anyway, right? Like he makes an incredible play, even though he's theoretically hit the wrong hole. And then there are plays where he sees it well as well. So it's not like he's outright bad at it. I just think it's inconsistent vision for him. But he's physically the most impressive back in this class, I think. Like he's big, strong, fast, dynamic, explosive, all those things. Like the physical traits are all there for Hampton. And obviously he's bigger than Jeanty. And I don't think it's a problem in any way, shape, or form, but you do look at Jeanty and you're like, man, that guy's small. he looks pretty tiny on the field. Whereas Hampton's a big, powerful back. He breaks a lot of tackles. He's not easy to get to the ground. He can break them in a variety of different ways as well. He can straight bust through a tackle. He can do it like with explosiveness, like he can leap clean over a guy, Saquon Barkley style. He can do it with quickness, like he has the elusiveness to make a move and get by a guy that way. So he's also pretty, like for a big guy, he's pretty good at getting skinny and getting through tight spaces and creases and stuff. He's got that. Remember the way Ronnie Brown for the old Miami Dolphins running back, part of the Wildcat and stuff? Ronnie Brown, for a big back, the best thing he did was navigate inside, like tight, condensed spaces between the tackles. He was really good at that despite being massive. So he's got a little bit of that to him as well. So yeah, I think that's him in a nutshell, like the most impressive physical specimen in this class, to the point where I think it can negate some inconsistent vision from him. And I think that's him in a nutshell.
Omarion Hampton, I also wrote down, he's got some freakish contact balance plays where he's got those, those matrix moves where he's bouncing off a tackler, is maintaining his balance, and then, picking up a big burst beyond that. I think my concerns with Hampton were as much a little bit of vision, when he's making a cut here and there. And that is, it's just an interesting dynamic, right? Because running backs are, they're usually taught by the book, right? On inside zone, you're going to read this defensive tackle to that defensive tackle. And it's supposed to be a little color by numbers, but it's also the position that you want to have the most feel at, because you're one of the best athletes on the field and you've been running to space your entire life. So you want to give them the opportunity to run to space, but there is, you always use that color by numbers phrase. Like there is like a very simple read, this guy to that guy, make one decision, downhill and cut. And there's some of those he'll miss. And then I think he's a much better zone runner, smooth zone runner, than he is gap runs when you've got a puller, right? When it's power, when it's counter. And some running backs just have a better feel for patience, and then boom, hit the hole. And I don't think he's as good there. But I think as a pure zone runner, even if he's going to miss a read here and there, very smooth, explosive, as you said, burst through the hole, get skinny, does a lot of good things to maximize yards as a zone runner that I really like.
And the reason why it's potentially a problem if a guy's not reading it, quote unquote, correctly all the time is because offensive linemen are blocking for a specific point of attack, right? And if you consistently change the point of attack without good reason, you're upsetting that guy's leverage, right? Like he's blocking this guy to a specific place, expecting the running back to be going in the opposite direction, which is how the block works. But if the running back ends up going somewhere else, all of a sudden he's making a block to the wrong place. He's making a block to the running back instead of away from him. And as I say, sometimes Hampton makes it work anyway, right? But there are too many plays on his tape where there's a guy being blocked at the second level now to the wrong place, right? So suddenly what would have been open at the second level, like he's making his own life harder effectively by undermining some of the blocks that are attempting to free him space. So like he's got a lot of plays where there's nowhere to go. Some of that is on him. A lot of it isn't, but some of it is on him. And you're like, if he'd taken the correct pathway, this linebacker would not have been one-on-one in the hole with him.
By the way, I love that you brought up Ronnie Brown. And if we do some more retro drafts, the 05 draft would be a great one. Ronnie Brown and his teammate Cadillac Williams both go in the top 5
And then
Like
Benson, right? Cedric Benson. See the other third running back
he
that
went,
year?
yeah, Benson goes fourth, and then Ronnie Brown goes fifth. So we're going to talk about the Ohio State teammates, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Imagine having two running backs, and Cadillac was highly touted, more highly touted than Ronnie Brown. And Ronnie Brown goes number 2, and then Cadillac goes number 5. 3 running backs in the top 5. Aaron Rodgers falls. It'd be a great draft to go back through. I think I did live tweet it last year. Live tweet the 05 draft last year. It was a fun one though. Yeah. So anyway, I like Hampton quite a bit. I have to give a shout out to our guy Willie Lampkin again, though. I know he didn't have the best workout in the world, but it was unbelievable watching. I still do it, man. I'm watching a 278, 279 pounder, whatever he is. The number of times that he is just out leveraging at ACC defensive tackles and making a key block. He was fantastic, but there were also so many plays. We call them the no chance plays. And we would say Omarion Hampton had no chance on this play, right? There's just 3 dudes in the backfield. He can't do anything. There was too many of those plays with UNC. But Willie Lampkin continued to impress me every time I watched Omarion Hampton.
If Lampkin had put together one of those Jason Kelsey short shuttle times, I'd have been like, "That's my guy right now." I'm pounding the table immediately. Like any, take him as high as you want. I guarantee it's gonna work out. But unfortunately, his workout made me upset.
Anything else on Hampton? I'm trying to see if I got anything good.
No. So
note-wise,
again, the division thing is complex because there are plays where he sees it, like sometimes because the blocking was not necessarily amazing every single play. There are plays where his instant reaction to the developing, changing, blocking, like all the stuff we're talking about, the crowd on Fremont Street, where his instant reaction ability to that is sick, like really, really good. And he can make some of those plays work really well. It's just that it's not like Jeanty's where it's almost always exactly on point every single play. There are times where it looks really good for Hampton. There are times where it's bad for Hampton. I'm not sure why. Like, sometimes you can see a pattern with the way players work with their vision. They're always trying to run to space or whatever it is. I can't see a pattern in why Hampton's vision is inconsistent, but I think it is notably inconsistent relative to certainly Jeanty.
One other thing I did want to note on Hampton, he was a workhorse. We talked about Ashton Jeanty being a workhorse. Hampton had 6 games of 30-plus carries. You're not seeing nearly as much of that in college football now than you used to. Ken Walker did that a couple of years ago for Michigan State. Hampton, they've relied on him quite a bit, and I don't think this isn't a knock, but I think it's actually a good thing. That they've relied on him, and he's shown that he can be a workhorse. It's not to the point where I think he's been so overtaxed like Jeanty may have been just last season that it ends up becoming a negative. But I was impressed with, him handling the workhorse role at UNC. All right. So you've got 2 tiers, the Jeanty tier, the Hampton tier. I kind of agree with that. My 3 through 5, we both have the same top 6. My 3 through 5 I could see as somewhat interchangeable. Let's go through your number 3 right now.
Yeah. My number 3, Caleb Johnson from Iowa. He's interesting. So big back, like visibly large body in the backfield, 6 foot, 225, I think it was his measurements. And it looked like it's obvious. I think, didn't you comp him to Joe Mixon at one point?
Yeah.
Before? Same idea, right? Like Mixon is a visibly big body in the backfield in today's NFL. I thought he was a pretty solid combination of like agility and power. Testing wasn't particularly good for him. The most impressive trait is people just bounce off this guy when he's running. Like when he's up to full speed, it's like every now and again, whenever this is appropriate, I pull out that scene from Beverly Hills Cop of the giant semi that's like going down the street and cars are just like skittling out of its way, right? It's just bouncing cars left and right. And I've done it for like Vita Vea and various other people. That's what Caleb Johnson's like. Once he's running, people literally just ricochet off him to the ground. It's insane. Part of that is the fact that he's 225 and rolling. Part of it is his stiff arm is amazing. And I think there's a lot of plays where he like subtly hits. It's not like the Derrick Henry stiff arm to hell. It's like he just subtly, his arm hits the guy and therefore the guy can get nothing on him and that guy skittles to the ground. It's a weirdly subtle stiff arm where you almost don't notice that he's delivered it. You just sort of notice the guy bouncing to the turf. where I think it's complicated for him is usually we're talking about, or so far we've been talking about running backs where the blocking has not been consistently amazing. Iowa's blocking is consistently insane. And almost every play he's looking at, like one of his most impressive sort of highlight reel plays, when you see it in the end zone, it literally is a straight line up the middle. The kind of bodies start converging around him, and from the sideline, it looks like it was like muddy and he had to do stuff. But actually, when you look at the end zone, all he had to do was run straight up the field, and the stuff just parted in front of him, like, you know, the seas parting in his path. So where my concern is for him, there was some really, really well blocked plays, and he looks amazing on those. And again, listen to what the comp is, not the player. Derrick Henry is amazing if you get him up to speed, right? Where Derrick Henry has problems, if they happen in a game, is if a team wins at the line consistently enough that he kind of can't get the head of steam, you know, going, and you kind of consistently get him stopped before he gets started. And that's why when you think of Derrick Henry, so many of his best plays are like they're wide zone plays. You think of Derrick Henry as like this sledgehammer, but actually, if you get him running, that's when he becomes so hard to stop because he's 250. Caleb Johnson, similar thing, right? If you get him running, he's really difficult to stop. But where I think the lack of kind of top tier athleticism and explosion and instant quicks shows up is in those tighter spaces. And that's like everything becomes tighter. Number one, when you get to the NFL, and number two, if the blocking isn't as good. So that's my only question. I think his vision is really good, particularly for zone plays in the cutback lane. He's really good at identifying that consistently. He's got power. When he's running, he is like a bowling ball. He's like juggernaut. He's so hard to stop. But I do wonder how much the picture changes if the blocking disintegrates around him a little bit, or if you just reduce the advantage that he had in that capacity.
I think I throw on some plays on the side here to try to capture what you were saying. Was it Northwestern where it looks like it's like a 41-yarder right up the gut? It feels like it's converging, but it is kind of open. I think Caleb Johnson does a nice job of making the offensive line right, though, too, which is the sign of a good zone runner. I'm going to accumulate all of the comps that you've made. So just to really deceive people. So you've called Ashton Jeanty is exactly like Barry Sanders. Omarion Hampton is Ronnie Brown. And now Caleb Johnson is Derrick Henry. Is that what you want the people to know?
Not without context.
I'm kidding. We would never do something like that. You were talking about the run blocking. To me, the signature play for him, though, is against Minnesota, where the backside tackle or backside guard loses completely. He has to outrun a defensive tackle who's, you know, trailing him from behind, patters his steps, gets to the second level, finds the end zone for 25, 30-yarder, whatever it was. I think he's got that in him, too. Just the footwork is just smooth. The Joe Mixon comp for me, because Mixon doesn't break a ton of tackles, and now that we're later in his career, he's more of a get what's there zone runner for 6, 7, or 8 yards. He's not anything like what you just described for Caleb Johnson breaking tackles. But it's more about, I think it was our friend Bobby Slowick's phrase, riding the wave when you're a zone runner. You're just kind of like flowing, and then, you know, just flowing with the play. I think he's got all of that. And maybe it's because it's Iowa, right? And they're just, you talk about the blocking, you talk about the running backs, like that's what they're trained to do, is run the wide zone mostly and run it smoothly and efficiently. And I think he does all of that very well.
Yeah. Like, I think it was a great combination. Like, I'm not saying he's a creation of that system or that blocking as well. Like, and I think the other thing, you're right, he outran people. Like, he was a 4.57 or something. It was his 40 time. I think he feels faster than that. He's not getting caught from behind. Once he's rolling, again, similar the Derrick Henry thing. Once he's motoring, you're not catching him. Like, he's fast, plenty fast enough. And I think you're right. He was a perfect complement to that blocking. Like, he helped set up plays. He maximized what the blocking was. My question is simply, like, I think he'd be great in a zone scheme at the next level. Like, I think he's got such a good feel for how to set up those plays, you know, run it correctly, help the line out, sort of maximize the gap, create the gap himself. But my concern for him would be, you know, if he goes to a situation where the blocking is not like, it's not a plus, right? Maybe it's not bad, but if it's just average, if he just goes to an average run blocking situation, I kind of worry for whether that's when you start to see the limitations of that short area creativity, burst, acceleration, like the things that the physical traits are there to create. I worry that that becomes a bigger problem if the situation becomes worse around it.
Chat's asking for more comps from you, so just keep them flowing. Keep all the. Remember, embrace the comparison, right? Embrace the comparison is what we always encourage people to do. Check the mic. We can compare certain things without equating. Compare, don't equate. Compare, do not equate.
A lot of people have come to Caleb to Arian Foster because of that kind of gliding, full speed style thing. I see it. I get it. It's not my favorite comp in the world, but I understand why it comes up.
Arian Foster comes up every year
for everybody that glides.
Anybody that's like efficient zone runner, and usually in Foster, off the top of my head, I don't think he made a ton of people miss either. He was just a very good zone runner, very effective. He wasn't like, wiggle and power. It was just good zone runner, good feel, which is why I think he went undrafted and then became a really effective player. I think Johnson has some of that with some of the tackle breaking ability, which is really impressive. So I have Caleb Johnson as my 5, but he was one of the guys I mentioned. I got the feels watching. I was like, wow, I visibly, unexpectedly impressive when I was watching Caleb Johnson, which is why, like, I personally tried to watch Cam Ward late in the process when I was evaluating QBs. I tried to watch from a scouting sense, watch Ashton Jeanty late in the process, because I do believe that's where bias is built in when you're like, well, this is the consensus top guy. Now it's number 2. And as you go down, you're expecting to see worse. So I try to do it out of order, so I'm not biased by that. So in the middle of watching running backs, I'm watching Caleb Johnson, and I was like, okay, yeah, this dude, I get it. I get why people love him, and I get why you have him at 3 and why others might have him at 3 in this class.
I did a similar thing. I kept him for quite a way into the process because you would kind of flag that you thought I would like him a lot. So I didn't want to be I deliberately, for anyone else that I thought could be running back 3, I watched before Caleb Johnson so that I could then compare him in my brain directly to the people that I had ranked, 3, 4, 5 or whatever, and ended up putting him ahead at 3. But I think this tier is really close. I think 3 through 6, 7 are very close.
That's how I would describe it too. 3 through 6 or 7, definitely close. So remind me again, who was your, so Caleb Johnson's number 3 for you, 5 for me. Who was your 4 again? Is that Skattebo?
Dylan Sampson from Tennessee.
Oh, it's Sampson. All right. Sampson's number 6 for me. Let's get into Dylan Sampson, a Mike Renner favorite here.
So this is another one where the situation around him is very relevant and has to come up for a slightly different reason. So Iowa, the situation is great because the run blocking is on point. It's a good offensive line. It's consistently sort of creating well-blocked run plays. Tennessee, the problem is that offense is such a weird system and such an unusual, it creates spaces where spaces don't exist in any other offense, right? And normally we focus on that from a wide receiver standpoint. We talked about it years ago with Jalen Hyatt. We've talked about it this year with Dante Thornton Jr. Like it's not a real system relative to like an NFL system, right? So these guys it's abstractions. You're looking at wide receivers. Like this is not wide receiver tape. This is effectively like picking an athlete, asking him to run like a go route and a hitch, just in practice and be like, yeah, that's my number 1 wide receiver. It's impossible. It's a complete and total projection. Well, that extends to the running game as well, where running against 5-man boxes is perfectly typical for Dylan Sampson. There were 4-man boxes that I was looking at times. Now, remember, there are 5 blockers on the offensive line. So when you're running into a legitimate 4-man box, automatically it should be a huge gain, right? And this was not like, 3rd and 18, it's a 4-man box. This is like 1st and 10. So that you have to factor that in, right? Dylan Sampson is running against some absurdly light fronts. So consequently, he's got more space to work with. And when you're talking about a 5'8", 200-pound, guy that survives and thrives off moves and speed and quickness, having more space to work with is hugely relevant. It's hugely important. So just like Caleb Johnson, I think you at least have to ask the question, what happens if this picture in front of him on a consistent basis, like the average picture, what happens if the average picture gets worse? I think you have to ask the question, what happens when the average picture for Dylan Sampson gets A, worse, and B, more packed with bodies? Because that's going to happen at the next level. Now, countering that, like, so that's just context, right? We need to at least think of that when we're watching Dylan Sampson tape. Then you get to the tape and you're like, okay, this guy, I think, strings together moves better than anybody else in this draft class. Jeanty, but better than anybody outside of Ashton Jeanty. Like, he can do everything from a move standpoint, like spins, juke moves, like jump cuts, little bits of power, like leaping over people, and he can do it all sequentially with no lag time, right? There are other guys where they've got all those in the bag, but it's like one at a time, right? It's like you select the club, take the swing, and then you got to put it back, and you got to get the next club out. Like, they can do that, but he can do it all. Like, it's like he's got all of them in his hand at any one time, and it's just like swing, 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 swing. His ability to just string together the moves is the most impressive thing I've seen from him.
No, I agree. I was trying to watch, pulled up some of his explosive plays to back you up on some of like what Tennessee's going up against. He's got this long run against Oklahoma, 5-man box, and he's got a lead blocker in there. So it's 6-on-5, right? So just remember the math of football, right? A 7-man box is usually 6 blockers against 7, or sometimes it's 7-on-6, but it's 6 against 7, and the running back is supposed to make one guy miss, right? And then you add an 8th guy to the box, you add an extra blocker. Okay, you have to make the 8th man miss. We're talking about Tennessee have 6 blockers against 5 in the box. So you're already, it's like 7-on-5. It's insane. So yeah, that is a question, right? But I like the way you described it. I wrote down just that he slides off tackles, right? He's another force indirect contact type of player. He's very good at that. You just haven't seen a whole lot of against 7 in the box, against 8 in the box. Yeah. How does he navigate tight spaces? How does he find the 3 yards, right? Which sometimes is just as important. I'm a speed, big play guy. Love that. Love what Jahmyr Gibbs brings to the Lions and how special that can be when you set a guy up. But sometimes just finding 3 when it's not there is extremely important. And we haven't seen a ton of that from Dylan Sampson.
I think when we had Renner on, Renner loves Dylan Sampson as well. I think Renner said that he plays with that kind of, level of violence and determination that the NFL likes. Like, it just looks right. He's also like, he's got a 10.48 100-meter time on his resume. This is a legit home run threat. Like, that's sprinter speed. So he can go when he finds the hole, when he gets the crease, when he gets space. He is a legitimate home run threat. Like, comparing him to Jalen Wright from the same offense recently coming out, I thought that his balance and power was better than Jalen Wright in the same offense. I liked Wright's vision inside and his ability to set up blocks a little bit better. So it's sort of it's a little bit of a kind of mixed bag. Like, each guy had strengths, but like Sampson's speed, vision, balance, ability to string together moves, all extremely impressive. Sometimes 200 pounds, I think, shows up. Like, there are plays where he's just ragdoll to the floor because 200 pounds is 200 pounds, but it doesn't happen that often. Overall, I think he's a really impressive player.
Yeah, it's funny because he ran 4.46 at the combine, and he was one that I just noted during the season, like, things look different when he's running the ball for Tennessee. Again, just like in passing, watching college football this year, I did expect to see a little more speed and athleticism when I went back play for play to watch that. So I don't know if it always shows up despite having the track history. And given the track history, you might expect him to run a little bit faster in the actual 40 at the combine. So I think it's all fine. It's cogent, solid.
It's all fine.
It's all fine. But I think I expected to see a little bit more special speed and athleticism actually show up on film for Dylan Sampson. Jalen Wright, you felt the speed. Yeah, because he played faster and took it to the house. Felt like more often. I don't know have the exact numbers for me, but
no, I think that's fair. Like, Jalen Wright definitely felt more like once you give him the crease, he's gone. Whereas I think Sampson has some of that potential in him as well, but it doesn't show up as often, or didn't show up as often.
So again, Sampson's by 6. He's your number 4 running back from Tennessee. He was 22 rushing touchdowns last year. He knew how to find the end zone. I'm not necessarily calling him a great, there's a couple guys in this class who I think are fantastic tight red zone type of runners. But yeah, Sampson was a playmaker, man, for Tennessee. It is always difficult to unpack that entire offense and to repeat for the millionth time. Good for Tennessee, good for Josh Heupel, good for college football, difficult for NFL evaluations because they're exploiting the hash marks, they're exploiting space, which is good football coaching, but it's bad for NFL draft projections because that's not how the NFL runs.
It is a great college offense. It is hateful for projecting anything to the NFL because it is so far away from what the NFL is doing. That's the problem. That's why I don't like it. From the college perspective, it's fantastic. It's a cheat code. Like it is a perfect way of creating advantages for your athletic playmakers. But it becomes very frustrating when you then have to project that to the NFL when these guys are going to have to do something very, very different than they are doing in college.
All right, man. Sampson's your 4. Who's your top? Who's your number 5 again?
Skattebo.
All right, my number 3, Cam Skattebo from Arizona State. How'd you have Skattebo? Why'd you have him at number 5? Were you expecting, given how much I had talked him up, were you expecting to like him? Were you expecting to have him in your top 5?
So I'd kind of seen enough of him already to have a rough idea of what he was before getting into his tape. And, a lot of people are like, there's a lot of Skattebo fans, I think. A lot of people love this guy. I don't know if I was expecting to push him quite this high. And honestly, again, this world of like 3 through 6 or 7 is very close. You have him at 3. I don't hate that at all. And in fact, there's a little bit of like buyer's remorse for me. I could be convinced to put him at 3, but I'm like kind of sad that I didn't. I mean, look, he's so fun. He's the most fun running back prospect in this draft, I think. Like he is built like an absolute tank. And the way college measurements or college listed measurements are they're propaganda. They're fake news. They're not what the guy actually is. Well, Skattebo measured an inch shorter, but 4 pounds heavier than he was listed. So he's both thicker and like shorter than you thought he was. And he was already like built like a tank. His contact balance is absolutely just sick. It's stupid. He routinely comes out of the other side of contact that looks like the play's over, right? He leads the nation in plays where you've looked away because you thought it was stopped. And they're like, wait, it's still going? Yeah. What the hell? Like, I thought the play was over. I've already gone to like the next thing, or, look like, this world of nobody's attention span lasts more than 6 seconds anymore. So you're like, that play's over. Let's go do something else. You're like, no, what? He's still going? How did that happen? He's got great vision as well. It's not just he's not just a sort of impossible to stop tank. He's got really good vision. He's a menace at the second level because he isn't just charging for contact. Like, I think you think these guys that are like bowling ball, impossible to stop guys, they're just like headed straight for a safety and running him over. He isn't. It feels like he should be, but actually he's looking for cuts and, the right leverage to attack people as well. He reminded me, you ever watch a good skier and it's like when they go down moguls, it's like their legs are independent from their body. Like their head stays like dead level, but their legs are like flailing side to side. That's what Skattebo runs like. The up half doesn't really move, but the legs are just like left, right. It's like that line from Friends. Michael Flatley's legs flail apart, independent from his body. Skattebo's does as well. Like his legs will fly one side to the other, making these cuts. But actually, his top half is pretty steady. It's like a ship in the sea. It stays, just keeps on going.
Completely familiar. I'm former teammates with Bodie Miller, U.S. Skiing legend. So
I can imagine few things more terrifying than you flying down a mountain out of control.
Well, we were baseball teammates, not skiing teammates. Bodie was.
No, I know. I'm just saying that you don't strike me as somebody that has skied
from the Northeast and have not touched skis. And
and I think that's wise. Yeah, I think that's a good decision.
I don't think it would have ever been good for my health, given my balance, body type, athleticism.
Would have been bad for your health. Would have been potentially catastrophic for the health of others that might have been around you when you were trying.
Get Bodie on the podcast. I think it was 2. Was it? No, I was only there 1 year with him. He did 2 years with the Nashua Pride. Played a little left field. What a year I had with the Nashua Pride. Triple H was our first base coach. Bodie Miller was our left fielder. Not at the same time, but it was great. We did some great stuff. Found an old picture of me with Mr. Belding from Mad Tight 90s Night when I was with the Fresno Grizzlies. I could put that out on social media. I've had some great celebrity encounters through the years. Sergeant Slaughter was there in Nashua. Got some old pictures somewhere of me and Sarge. Anyway, let's focus on Skattebo here. He's just a really good football player, though, too, Sam. Like I said, I think he's an excellent pass game weapon. Not even because he's going to be the best athlete, but I think he can run routes. There's several plays where he's open on scramble drills and just has a feel for getting open. You saw how much Arizona State relied on him in the college football playoff. He's taking the direct snaps and throwing passes. The same thing that you would say about Tyler Warren. Look how much Penn State's using Tyler Warren as a quarterback, direct snaps. They're feeding him the ball. That's how Arizona State uses Skattebo. And he just reminds me a lot of Kareem Hunt with the contact balance. Might not have the breakaway speed, but I'm okay with that. I like the breakaway speed when I know I have the Lions offense or I know I have the Eagles offense. And man, if you set those dudes up, they'll take it to the house. But I think Skattebo's great up to 20 yards. And I don't think the speed or whatever perceived lack of athleticism that he has affects him as a runner. I saw somebody in the chat earlier, and I absolutely love this as a person that's sunsetting comps. Combination of David Montgomery and Kevin Falk, right? I love that. I mean, David Montgomery and his tackle breaking as a runner, and then Kevin Falk and his pass game feel and ability as a receiver. Falk was never a great athlete, but he was just, I can run receiver routes, I can run backfield routes. I'm always in the right place at the right time. I think that's going to be Skattebo. I just think he's been too productive in the FCS level, FBS level, every single level, right?
He's one of these guys. Productive. Yeah, he's one of these guys. Remember, like every now and again, people pull out Derrick Henry's high school stats and they're a joke, right? They're a comedy. It's like the Barry Sanders thing, right? It's the sort of video game numbers. Skattebo's got that as well. He had 6,000 yards and 69 touchdowns in his high school career. Then, crushed it at Sacramento State. And then Arizona State had 2,000 plus all-purpose yards last year. Like his production everywhere he's been has been like off the charts insane. Every now and again, there are players that remind you of like the lower down the level you get, the more you can kind of spot the guys that don't belong at this level, right? They're just bigger, stronger, faster. Like you're a different athlete to the people you're going up against. Like if you ever go and watch, the high school tape of NFL players, it's almost universally ridiculous looking because they were these guys were already freaky athletes by the time they were in high school. So they're going up against people built like me who may or may not develop into larger human beings down the line, but they're already there. And they were there since the age of like 15, right? Cam Skattebo's high school highlights, again, they look the same, but so do his he's been that guy all the way along where the athletes are getting better, but they're not getting any better at tackling him. He's still a bowling ball. It's impossible to bring to the ground. And yeah, okay, he doesn't have the top speed breakaway, home run ability, but once he's at the second level, he's still really hard to bring down, right? Yeah. So you might be able to catch him up, but are you going to be able to get him to the ground? Because that's not a given. That's like there's so many plays where, okay, he might not get a touchdown, but he's going to get 30 yards even at the point where people have caught him, right? Like just bringing him to the ground is a problem. So he's creating explosive plays, even if he's not necessarily putting it in the end zone on some of these plays where you can run him down from behind. My only two concerns, and they're speculative, right? Number one, it's similar to the Ashton Jeanty thing that we flagged before. Jeanty had the monster year of, 375 plus carries. Skattebo's already had a ton of work, right? Like how long can you play at that style and still be impactful, right? Like just how long, what is the durability? Yeah. What is the lifespan of a running back that plays in that style? Question, right? That I think is worth throwing out there. And then number two, with the way he plays, our fumble is going to be a problem at the next level. Remember, the NFL now, defenders are now snipers with that peanut punch. This is a dude that just fights through everything, is constantly trying to get, the last yard. That's when a lot of fumbles happen in the NFL, right? When a guy's trying to get the extra yardage, the ball is coming slightly away from his body, slightly out of where you want to carry it, and then linebacker comes in and boom, peanut punch, ball's out. So those are my only two questions. Number one, how long can you do that for? And number two, will fumbles start to become a problem? The only thing I would say about the first point running backs unless you find an absolute superstar, running backs are effectively now a one contract player in the NFL anyway. So if he's got one contract in him, I don't really care how long it lasts. You know what I mean? Like
That's what you're drafting. Yeah.
Yeah. So from that perspective, like again, unless you're drafting an absolute superstar who's going to get taken in the top 10 picks or whatever, most of these guys are one contract players.
And if the top speed, because maybe he's not as explosive as some of the others, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Sampson, not as explosive as some of these other guys he'd be competing with. If you get Skattebo in the 3rd or 4th round, that's going to feel like an absolute steal. I think you're just going to get a productive NFL player. So he's my RB3. For me, also shades of Tyler Algier, who I liked coming out, who just was a good, smooth zone runner who got what was there. I think Algier's had a really fantastic career so far, even if he's, RB2 now to Bijan. He's still getting a lot of carries despite having Bijan Robinson on the roster, which I think shows how good Algier is. So I think Skattebo is going to be a good NFL player.
Same.
And one of the best receivers in the draft. So you can use him there. So he's your 5. That's your top 5 then. Go through your top 5 really quick one more time, and then I'll review mine, and we'll touch on the one player that you don't have in your top 5.
Number 1, Ashton Jeanty, Boise State, in a class by himself. Number 2, Omarion Hampton, North Carolina, also in a class by himself. Number 2. Then number 3, and this is when my group starts, Caleb Johnson from Iowa, Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, and Cam Skattebo, Arizona State is 3, 4, 5.
All right, so I've had Ashton Jeanty, number 1, Omarion Hampton, number 2. Kind of agree with your tiers there. Cam Skattebo, number 3 for me. And the one person we haven't touched on yet, my number 4 is Travion Henderson. I had Caleb Johnson from Iowa at 5. So let's Travion's number 6 for you, correct?
Yeah. By the way, just one last point on the Skattebo thing. I do think there's something to like the feels, something to the motivational impact of that kind of guy. Like people, the way he plays the game galvanizes people. Like every now and again, there's a tone setter on either side of the ball, right? You can have defensive tone setters, you can have offensive tone setters, but a guy that does something that just gets everybody jazzed on the sidelines, I think there's an impact to that. And Skattebo, again, like leads the nation in plays where you look away and then he's somehow still going. Also, I think leads the nation in those plays where he does something, makes a run, makes 4 people miss, blah, blah, blah. And then the sideline is pumped. And I think that has an impact. The Saquon bar, it's a different thing, right? But when Saquon busts one of those runs and the dude's gone and it's a touchdown, obviously the touchdown is important, but like that gets everyone going, right? It has an impact. So I think Skattebo's bringing that as well.
I'm going to regret doing this, Sam, but let's do it anyway.
Do it.
Skattebo, if Tyler Warren, and we already mentioned Jack Besh as players. Tyler Warren's physicality feels special to me at tight end, as much as I've been poo-pooing the tight end class. Right. Skattebo's similar at running back, and see that there's some similarities to those players. So these aren't the only players in the draft. But if you're looking to increase your physicality, your it plays, whatever, Skattebo in this draft, I think Tyler Warren has that. And we mentioned if you're trying to increase your physicality on your team, Jack Besh is one of the more physical receivers, right? He's not a shifty after the catch type of guy. He's a physical guy. I know the similarities between all 3, so I'm not being biased here. But those 3 players all have some of that, what you just described with Skattebo. So if a team had Tyler Warren in the 1st, Jack Besh in the 2nd, and Skattebo in the 3rd, they're increasing their it factor there, right? Anyway.
Yeah.
As I'm watching.
A whole lot of grit being brought into that team.
A lot of grit. But like you literally see it on film. So they're not the only guys, but those guys it has popped watching film. Travion Henderson at number 4. Again, as a college football fan, I was actually surprised how much I liked Travion just as a pure running back. I think I know him as a big play player, right? 7.1 yards per rush last year. You see the big plays that he's always created since he was a true freshman, and the speed that he gets to the edge and, taking it to the house and what Travion's done. I was impressed with just his ability to run between the tackles and get what was there. I don't think he's got great power, but I think he finishes with low pads and well enough, right? I think he's a get what's there type of running back with big playability. And I think that combination plus his pass game ability, I think you just add up that he's very good at a lot of things and has some big play skills, and that's why I like Travion better than I expected and put him at 4.
Yeah, he's an interesting running back. I didn't love him, but there are definitely things to love. He's the best pass blocker of any back in this class. Like for a guy who's 5'10", 202 pounds, which is not big, like he buries people as like he number one reads it out well. Number two, he tends to absolutely annihilate these guys. He doesn't just get in their way. He absolutely decleats blitzing linebackers, potential threats. That's really impressive. And that's usually a weakness for almost any running back prospect you can find. He's really good at that. As you said, he's also a home run threat. Like he's incredibly twitchy, great burst. When he triggers, he is gone. Like it's instant acceleration, instant potential speed. He tends to have like one excellent move in him, but unlike Dylan Sampson, say, I don't think he strings them together particularly well. So he can like get to the second level, make a jump cut, get at, make a linebacker miss or a safety or whatever, bounce, spin, whatever. He's got quite a wide variety, but he's that guy who's got to take the club out, swing, put it back, get the next one. Like he's not able to like string them all together like a fluid kind of run of choreography. He's got sort of one set move. It's almost like he's thinking about each one of them. But if you can get him to the second level, that one is all he needs to do. And then he's got like room to make the guy or to get, to be gone and house it. I agree with you. I don't think he has a ton of power. He tends to lose collisions in a way a lot of these other guys don't, which is not like, it's not his fault. It's just he weighs 202 pounds and, the guys he's colliding with do not necessarily. But, unlike Jeanty, unlike Hampton, unlike Sampson, again, I don't think he's that great at avoiding that. Like if 202 pounds running up against 230 pounds, generally speaking, is going to lose a collision. How do you offset that? How do you prevent that happening? You pull that little subtle move right at the end, right? So that it's not 202 versus 230. It's 202 against 230 who doesn't quite have the clean shot on the 202, right? So you're able to, roll around the contact or sort of, it's not a clean hit where it's just inertia and physics. I don't think he's great at that. Like he tends to take some heavy shots or tends to take direct collisions where he just doesn't have the sand in his pants or the physics to win those. But I do like what he brings to the table. Like that, number one, that pass blocking thing plays immediately. Like you can have him on the field in all 3 downs. 2, the explosiveness is huge in today's NFL. And he is good at that burst explosion and the one move that he's got.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think the move set, so to speak, isn't special. I think it's quickness and acceleration is his game. And I think he's good at both, right? I think he'll take what's there between the tackles and has the big playability. So that's where I was a little surprised by Travion because I only pictured him as a big play threat watching him as a fan, watching him in passing. And I don't know if I'm leaning on this too much, but the running backs who will get 3 to 5 when it's there, but also get 50 when it's there. I think that's where he's just going to be really effective. And then you add the pass game, right? He ran a beautiful sluggo, slant and go against Purdue. We've seen him catch wheel routes. We've seen him catch the ball effectively out of the backfield. So I think he's really good. As a receiver, he is one of the few receivers I think you can move around, line up out wide. Skattebo, same thing, by the way, that you can line up out wide and do some different things. And so he adds that value. So I think there's a high floor with Travion Henderson because I like him running in between the tackles, but there's also a bit of a ceiling too with his ability to get to the second level and create big plays.
I don't think he has as good of a feel, say, for the zone game as Caleb Johnson. He feels more like he's just running on a track and hoping space emerges somewhere, as opposed to understanding like how to push the lane, how to create a bit of space, that type of thing. He's more reactive than he is like a part in manipulating the space and creating the space by himself. But I do think that like the things that he's good at absolutely play at the next level.
All right, man. So we both have the same top 6 because I had Travion at 4. You had him at 6. I had Caleb Johnson at 5. Yep. And then I had Dylan Sampson at 6. So we have the same top 6. So I'll let you get into your 7 through 10, and then I'll give my 7 through 10, and we'll go player by player. We'll see where there's some crossover here.
All right. And then like wide receivers, we'll do some names that didn't hit the top 10. Have you got a sleeper as well?
I have names. I definitely have names that didn't make the top 10 Because I have a feeling my sleeper is going to be somebody in your top 10 and vice versa.
Yeah,
We'll mention guys who just missed, I think. We'll see how it goes.
All right. So number 6, as we said, Travion Henderson, Ohio State. Number 7, Damian Martinez from Miami. Number 8 is Quinshon Judkins, also from Ohio State. Number 9, RJ Harvey Jr. from UCF. And then number 10, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt from Arizona.
You got JCM in there. Look at you. You took the Renner propaganda.
Well, after watching the tape, I did, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. That's great. All right, we got some similarities there. So I mentioned Dylan Sampson as my 6. Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State's my 7. I've got Kansas's Devin Neal as my 8. So you don't have him in your top 10.
Yep.
Oregon's Jordan James. Jordan James from Oregon at number 9 for me. And then RJ Harvey from UCF is my 10. So we've got some somewhat big names, I think, not in the top 10, and some differences here. So we'll go through your players first and then mine, the players that we haven't touched on yet.
All right, Martinez. So this guy is fascinating to me. He's one where I'm really, again, the interplay between the running back and the situation he's in is really fascinating. So he's 6 foot, 217 pounds. Like, he's a pretty big back with some really good lateral agility to him. A lot of jump cuts that he's able to string together, like not just a one cut and go. Like, he's actually able to bounce. The problem with him is that he almost always has to at the start of every single play. Like, the run blocking in front of him at Miami was consistently not good. He was, every time we got the ball at the mesh point, he looks up and it's just like a brick wall. It's almost like he needed to begin every run with like a jump cut out of the trash to get into the space to then start going. But that lateral agility is really impressive. He can make guys miss basically untouched in the hole, which again, for a big back, is not easy to do. And he can jump. He can get he's not just agile laterally, but he can get a gap. He can get like a full gap over with one jump cut. That's really impressive. But man, that blocking was rough. I don't know what impact that has. Like, my concern with, I really love the sort of potential of what he can do. That size, that athleticism, that power. He can break tackles. He doesn't run. So he's a little bit like, built like Tarzan, runs like Jane a little bit sometimes, not all the time. He can definitely break tackles, but like, he doesn't run, like, he's not as violent with it as some of these other guys, right? Like Caleb Johnson, just like, once he's rolling, the dude's just like juggernaut out there. People are bouncing off him. For a guy the size that Martinez is, there are some plays that end in a it's hard to sort of phrase this without it sounding really bad, but like a weak way, right? It's like, there was one play in particular where he was like looking for a reason to go down for like the last 5 yards. It's like, come on, you're 6 foot 215, 220, like, just, run over them. Like, they're not bringing you down. Let's go.
But he has those other plays too. I showed you the Florida State play. He's 3 or 4 yards into the play. There's like 8 dudes around him, and that became a 50-yard touchdown for Martinez. So
no,
it is interesting. Like, it's inconsistent, right? Because he's got some battering ram plays in there as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's hard to, like, those are the plays that concern me, but it's not like they happen all the time. If they did, I wouldn't have him, wherever I have him 7 on the rankings. Like, he's definitely got plays where he plays with power, but unlike, all these other guys, or most of the other guys we talked about, where it's consistently, they play with that violent intent. They, the Walter Payton thing, right? Never die easy, right? Never just give up. Never just give them the end of the down. Martinez does that sometimes, and I don't like. It's one thing when you're talking about a wide receiver that's like 170 pounds. You're like, okay, fair enough. That's a business decision, right? When you're 6 foot 215, 220, it's like, you shouldn't be making those calls. Like, just take the hit, deliver the hit. In fact, like, be the hammer, not the nail, and just like use your physicality. So like, there's just a few of those plays that concern me a little bit.
This one of the guys you were mad about his weigh-in, listed at 6 foot 232, and he comes in at 217.
Yeah. I didn't care as much because, 217, and he looks like a big body. It's still like, fair enough. Like, 230 was obviously a joke when you're listing him with that. But I didn't hate it as much because he's still a big, powerful guy. I feel like he's another one that's in the kind of Travion Henderson mold of he's more reactive than he is creative with his vision and how he sets up blocks and those kinds of things. Now, again, how much of that is like forced upon him because he had to react before he could get creative by the blocking breaking down in front of him. But he's only 21 years old. Like I really like the upside play of Martinez. And I thought he was getting better as the year wore on. Like there's a lot of reasons I think to like him.
Yeah, he's another one of those guys. He's not as long play, big play explosive, I don't think, but I think he's good up to 15, 20 yards.
And he's got a couple of those in there.
Yeah, he does. I mean, he's got some big plays. Like I said, the Florida State play was absurd.
In the bowl game, like was it Iowa State where he like almost one of the first plays he took to the house
when Cam Ward quit, the Cam Ward quit game. How did that not come up in all of our in-depth analysis? We didn't even bring up the Cam Ward quit on his teammates. Yeah, right.
And neither did anybody else.
Yeah, really, shockingly. So yeah, I liked Martinez. He was fringe top 10 for me. 3 years, really productive. 2 at Oregon State, 1 at Miami. I think he was for me. I think up to 3 through 7 is similar, and then 8 through probably 13 or 14 is similar for me. Where there's a lot of guys that I like and they all bring various things to the table. Damian Martinez is in that mix for me as well. So he's your 7. We'll get to your 8 in a minute here. Check the Mics, brought to you by our friends over at Timeline. 10% off your order of MitoPure over at timeline.com. You can use the code CheckTheMic at checkout. MitoPure is a supplement that can help you because it encourages cellular renewal. It works by promoting an essential cellular cleanup process that clears out dysfunctional mitochondria, aka your cell's battery packs. There are no supplements on the market that have better clinical research shown to be effective at targeting the effects of age-related cellular decline. With regular use, you'll see and feel the difference in the form of improved energy levels, better workouts, faster recovery, more endurance, and more. In fact, MitoPure is shown to deliver double-digit increases in muscle strength and endurance without a change in exercise. So, awaken the strength, power, and resilience already in you with the first and only supplement clinically proven to rejuvenate health at the cellular level. Again, Timeline's offering 10% off your order of MitoPure. You go to timeline.com/checkthemic. That's TIMELINE.com/checkthemic. All right, Sam, we got Martinez as your 7. Who's your 8 again?
Quinshon Judkins.
So he's my 7. Sorry, I was reading and trying to think at the same time. Yeah, so you were underwhelmed, I think, by Judkins. I thought I didn't get the feels watching Judkins. Yeah. I think he's good. I think he's a fine player. I didn't get the special feels watching him.
Yeah, I mean, so he's a guy, 6 foot, 221, tested kind of similarly to Omarion Hampton, but I felt like he was sort of significantly less explosive, dynamic, like the physical traits I thought showed up a lot less on tape for him than they did for Hampton. Some of that I think is usage. It's how they were deployed. I mean, Ohio State just used Judkins as a battering ram, as a hammer, like early downs by and large. And it's like, just to an extent, some of that is you're just like banging your head against a brick wall, which is a little unfortunate. But, he, again, another guy that can't necessarily string together the moves, but does have like the ability is there. Again, the club bag is pretty full. He's got a surprising lateral cut. I thought he catches the ball pretty well, like better hands than you'd expect for a big guy that's used as a hammer, used as just a battering ram. And he runs some pretty effective routes. He's not special, but I think he can be, 3 down back at the next level, can be there on the field in third downs. I just felt he had very little kind of wiggle to his game, especially in the open field. Like he's just looking head to space, head to a body, deliver a hit. It didn't feel as dynamic and as an effective. It was like it's good, it works, but it's just a little bit Thomas Jonesy. It's like you go into the space.
I'm not that down on Judkins because I think his and Thomas Jones was good for a while. We always make the Thomas Jones joke because the time that we caught him at the end of his career, early PFF, he was 3.5 yards. That's what he got. That's what he averaged. He got exactly what was there, nothing more. Judkins, he's got a lot of tacklers bounce off of him. He's got a little burst to the edge. He's pretty good at a lot of things, I think. He's also, I think, maybe the best goal line back available in the draft. Another one, I think Skattebo is going to be really good around the goal line with his feel and contortionist ability and everything. But Judkins, low pad level, finish, He was a high percentage goal line runner. When you look up the stats, somewhere 90-95%. Inside the 2, he was fine in the end zone. So I think that's going to be a key. The type of guy that could have one of those 10 to 12 touchdown seasons, even if he's not getting 300 carries a year.
Yeah, and look, just to sort of recap the Thomas Jones comp / meme at this point, like we use it too often, probably as a genuine pejorative, like this is bad, this is awful. But the whole point is, it was like, this guy will get you what the blocking generates and no more, but no less. And there's value to that. And it's like, there are people that would get you less than the blocking will generate. And Thomas Jones would maximize what was there, but no more. And that is kind of what I'm getting the feel for Judkins. Like, he's not creative. He will get you what's there, and he'll do a pretty good job of that, but he's not going to get you much more. And it's like, I'm maybe overstating it a little bit, but like, that's why he's down at 8, as opposed to, like, he's the worst, in my opinion, of the 2 Ohio State backs, and he's worse than some of these other guys, and worse than guys that he tests in a similar way. He's just a little bit stiffer, a little bit less creative, less wiggle to him. But I think he can be a functional 3-down back where he can get you what is there. And again, there is value to that. The other thing, like, there's a couple of guys in this draft where, like, insane earlier parts of their career, like, he had over 1,500 yards as a true freshman, which is the second best freshman season in SEC history to only Herschel Walker, right? Who's like one of the greatest college players to ever play the game, and then didn't quite live up to that in the NFL. But like, that's one of the best freshman seasons that anybody has ever had at any level of the game, right? Like, that's notable. I don't know how notable, but it's at least worth throwing out there.
Judkins is a very good player, man. I mean, 3 productive seasons that you mentioned, and almost the inverse of what we talked about with Jeanty. I mean, the 3-year carry total is over 750, but he went to Ohio State, had fewer than 200 carries last year because they had him and Travion. So he goes from a bit of a workhorse in the SEC, actually gets an easier workload despite the longer schedule and, going all the way to the national title game. So I think there's a lot to like about Quinshon Judkins. He's actually similar to Travion for me, but for different reasons. Like, I think there's a picture in your head that Travion's speed guy and Judkins is power guy, and that they're going to be, stylistically, they are different. But I think at the end of the day, they're both similar to me in that they're very good at a lot of different things, or just solid or better at a lot of things. I thought Judkins' acceleration, burst, speed's good. Tacklers have a tough time tackling him. I think his signature plays are, sprinting out toward the sideline and dudes bouncing off him as he's, maximizing, a 15, 20-yard gain. Seemed to happen quite a bit for Judkins. And like I said, I think he's got that nose for the end zone and the ability to win with pad level in tight area spaces. So I do like that about his game as well.
Yeah, I mean, the power definitely plays.
So Judkins is my 7. He's your 8. Who's your 9?
My 9 is RJ Harvey from UCF.
He's my 10. I like Harvey. There's one thing that was very annoying to me on film, but I'll let you start on Harvey.
So he's got an interesting story where, again, in this world of like, everyone's just using data, spreadsheets, like it's all abstractions, right? You're not kind of looking at the story, you're just looking at the things that so 24 years old, that's going to scare some people. Had an ACL injury at one point. So he redshirted at Virginia, then transferred to UCF, missed the 2021 season with an ACL injury, and then had 3 good seasons, right? So that's where you get to 24 years old as a prospect now. Short and stocky, 5'9", 208 pounds, like a real challenge to tackle. Like, that guy's difficult to get on the ground. 69 or more broken tackles in each of the last 2 seasons. Fast, explosive, like ran a 4.4 flat. Really, really good contact balance. Annihilates second level defenders when he's one-on-one. If he gets to the second level and you've got a linebacker coming down or a safety or a cornerback coming in to fill, that dude is ethering those people. Like, they are so done trying to get him to the ground. Again, like, so that, I mean, I think he's dynamic with the ball in his hands. I don't love his pass protection at all, even relative to, like, that's generally a weakness for most of these guys. So I think this is where sort of context starts to become, right? I think he's probably a day 3 pick. I think he might be a situational player and that I don't know that you're going to have him on the field in third downs because of that pass pro, and he might be a one contract guy because he's 24 years old. But all of those things are fine, right? Like there's a space for that, like in a ton of backfields.
Yeah, they're trying to predict what I didn't like about Harvey on tape. I like a lot. I mean, I know he's like listed as the same height as Ashton Jeanty. I thought he felt small. Like he felt like the guy that hides behind the offensive line and benefits from it, which is great. You know, he's tough to see. He's got good patience setting things up. And he's tough to tackle. He does have that bowling ball, tough to tackle type of feel, right? I love that about RJ Harvey. The thing I hated, I see everybody talking about 4.4 speed and the acceleration. I hate how much he bounces it outside. I can't stand how much he runs outside and bounces it out. And it works a lot. My fear is what we talked about maybe 90 minutes ago. When you do that, you're putting your offensive line in a bind, right? When you're watching a football game, and I hope our listeners are as astute to this as they should be, when you see the guy bounce it outside and he picks up 10 to 15 and it's like, holding call, a lot of the time it's the running back's fault that his offensive line held. When you run against the leverage and you're running outside the block instead of inside the block, the defender tries to run away from the blocker and the blocker holds him because he's losing leverage. He's losing the ability. He's just going against his block, and it's just instinctual. And it's not always on the lineman. I worry about Harvey bouncing it out so much that you're going to have those extra holding calls, and you got to take what's there instead of trying to always hit the home runs. And again, it works a lot of the time, but it's like, especially we see this on the edge a lot with receivers. When receivers get caught holding, you got to go inside the receiver's block instead of outside of it. When you go outside of it, they get caught holding. That was my concern with Harvey, but he's tough to tackle. He's got some patience in between the tackles. I just wish he did a little bit more of that because he is tough to see, and tough to tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. He's definitely a guy that goes after the big play. I do wonder how much of that was a reflection of the offense around him. And it's like that dude was the UCF offense. And it's kind of like, how much of Caleb Williams pressing was the realization that if he didn't get points at the end of this drive, USC was in trouble. How much of him trying to get the touchdown is a realization that if he doesn't do something on this drive, they're not scoring points. They're not, like, their offense is buried, right? I do wonder if he's able to, like, change that mindset. Okay, hey, if you can find it, great, but we don't need you to do everything, right? We've got, you're the rotational guy in this backfield now. You're not even like, not only are you not the offense anymore, you're not even the alpha back on this team. Just go out there, run the play as it's supposed to be played, do what you can when you find the space, but, like, don't go hunting for the crazy play. I wonder if you can modify that a little bit because of that context.
Get downhill, take 5 to 7 if it's there, instead of trying to get 15 to 20 every time. And I'm good. I like RJ Harvey enough to put him at 10. Who else you got here in your top 10, Sam?
So that was 9. My number 10 is Ja'Cory Krusky-Merritt.
All right, let's do it. But only played one game this past year. JCM.
Yeah. So weird kind of prospect. Basically didn't play in 24 because was ineligible. I couldn't work out exactly why he was ineligible, but like NCAA couldn't play.
Good luck.
But that then meant, so he was at both the Hula Bowl and then the Shrine Bowl, right? And in the Shrine Bowl, he was the practice week MVP, like the player of practice week. They do the voting the same way that the Senior Bowl does, where they kind of who was the best during the week of practices. So he got a ton of work. He was voted the practice player of the week, and then he was the game MVP as well. Saw an absolute ton of work during that kind of all-star bowl circuit. But he's 5'10", 206 pounds, so another reasonably, short, stocky, compact guy. Runs at his pro day, or at not his pro day. I think it was the Big 12 pro day, maybe at a pro day. Anyway, had a 4.45 and a 41-inch vertical, like legit athlete, legit explosion. Like really low center of gravity again, sort of feels shorter than 5'10", even though 5'10" is pretty short. Lance Zierlein is talking him up as like as a round 3-4 pick, as a guy. This is not a sleeper pick. This is not a guy that's like totally under the radar, even though we don't have 2024 tape. You go back to some of his previous tape, he's got really good contact balance. Again, explosive. He's a home run threat as well. it's basically 1 year of production for him. So, not a ton of miles on the clock, but he can cut, he can bounce players at the second level at full speed, elite burst through the hole once he gets a gap. I really liked his tape.
His cutting ability is incredible. I mean, some
Yeah.
of the highlight reel cuts that he has. So Mike Renner, when we did here on Check the Mic, a little bit of draft talk during the fall. I got Renner, I got Rick Spielman now with the Jets. I got a few people to Dane Brugler, just give some early draft class takes. And I asked everybody for their guys in the fall. Give us some names to watch that are not on the radar. And this was another Renner guy. We're mentioning Renner a lot during running back takes here. But yeah, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was the guy that he mentioned, and we were in the middle of he'd only played the one game at Arizona after transferring from New Mexico. And then at the Shrine Bowl, what is it? The best deceleration time, all the various things that they were charting using the chips in the shoulder pads and everything. He's just a really slick cutter. I mean, I didn't know that Zerline was talking him up as round 3 or whatever, but I could see it. Yeah. I mean, it's like a violent cutting. I don't even know how to describe it, but he's got a style to his game that looks like it'll play for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Zerline was saying, like, this guy do not be surprised when you see his name called earlier that everyone's expecting it to be. Like, this is not somebody that the NFL is sleeping on. This is somebody that the NFL is acutely aware of, even if, everyone else is sort of late to discovering him because of not really playing last year, because of it being, the All-Star Bowl circuit, et cetera, that's kind of pushing him out there. But, like, he's explosive, he's dynamic, he's violent with his running style. Like, that guy, I think, is a really impressive physical specimen.
I love it. He'll be just outside the top 10 for me, as I gave the rest of my top 10. So that's your 10. And let me get into some of my names now that we did not have crossover in. So the only two that I have that you have not talked about, I had Dylan Sampson 6. We talked about him. Quinshon Judkins 7. We talked about him. It's my 8 and 9. Devin Neal from Kansas. Similar to Krosky-Merritt for me. The way he cuts, he had some of the just breathtaking short area moves. I have him as running back 8. I know there was a lot of Devin Neal fans, in the draft community as well. I was just really impressed with his movement skills, short area. I don't know about the long burst and everything, but just short area movement skills and everything he brought to the table. Very impressed by Devin Neal.
Yeah, I like Devin Neal. I have him at 12, but I think this whole area is a pretty tight group, and I could be convinced, to move guys up or down. The thing, so Devin Neal, 5'11", 215 pounds. His deal is he's like a 40th percentile athlete, right? So, and we tend to chase athletes at running back. Generally speaking, I don't know that it necessarily, like, you can be a 40th
percentile by what measure?
Like, I think it's relative athletic score, like composite. But like, I think you can be a marginal athlete at running back, but it means you need to be very good at everything else. So Bucky Irving, classic example last year, right? Who tested terribly, was marginal at best as an athlete. And yet Bucky Irving's just really good as a running back. So who cares? And I think he's in that group of people, right? So Hayden Winks from Underdog had him comp to Devin Singletary, who's another guy in that kind of bucket of small, not a particularly good athlete, but he's just a good running back. And Devin Singletary's had some good seasons in the NFL, been a starter for a while. That's the world that I think that Devin Neal is in. He is good at the other stuff. Like, he's got instant read and react skills. He's really smooth with his movements. There's no wasted movement, which is pretty big. If you can't, if you're not a great athlete, you can't waste a movement because people will catch you. And he can string together moves. He's got that skill set that a lot of the guys ahead of him on my list, I've remarked, they don't have, right? They do not have the ability to string together moves. He does, and he sets up blocks well. Again, that's another thing that some of the guys above him I didn't think had necessarily in their skill set. Follows his lineman well, sets up blocks, understands the leverage battle. Good hands as well, like good hands and ball security. So I don't think he's a risk in that world. I just think he's good. I'm just a little scared of those guys that are not great athletes.
Man, I wasn't watching Neal and thinking he's not a good athlete. Maybe you use the word reaction, which I think might be the best descriptor, because he had this one, when I talk about a few breathtaking plays, he had this one play against Illinois where he makes a cut. He's about to get tackled. He's got 2 plays against Illinois. Makes a cut. He's about to get tackled. And he just instantly, like, swipes the tackler past him. Just boom. Unbelievable reaction. to avoid that tackle. And then he's got another play, kind of a short area, one-on-one in the hole, kind of like an Oklahoma drill, jukes Illinois defender right out of his shoes. And I'm thinking, this guy's a very good athlete, right? This guy's a cutter, juke, short area quickness, unbelievable athlete without the long speed and the other things that go into the athleticism. But when you mentioned reaction, that's not measured in those things, right? And that's where it does feel like he's kind of special, right? He sees and feels defenders and makes them miss in short area spaces. And I think he feels like a scat back type, but being at 215, I think is pretty impressive. And a couple of those, I make my annual every time I see a good juke. I think of Dion Lewis, who like made me fall out of my chair one time at the scouting combine by juking on air, and was like, "Whoa, that looks different and special." And every year I see a couple of those, and I'm like, "Oh, that reminds me of Dion Lewis." And this is what Devin Neal had. He had one of those, the Dion Lewis juke. I wonder if our social team could find Dion Lewis at the scouting combine in 2010 or whenever he came out. It was unbelievable, but I think Devin Neal had some of those on film. The short area jukes that were just making defenders look stupid.
Yeah, so his kind of his athletic composite is kind of weird because some of the jumps were solid. The 40 time was, I think, 4.58. His short shuttle though was 4.53 at his pro day, which is awful. So I think it's a composite figure, paints him as like a marginal, average at best athlete, which again is fine. But I think that means the selling point for Devin Neal is it's the on-field stuff. It's like, how good is he at the actual mechanics of the position? Because there's not that there's no upside, but you're not projecting growth. You're not projecting, hey, if we coach him a bit better, if we get him doing these things, suddenly there's all this extra room of development. You're like, this is what you're getting, and that's fine. But like, is he good enough that's going to work?
So he's my 8. He's just out of the top 10 for you. My 9 is Jordan James from Oregon, another guy I know our friend Mike Renner really seemed to like. It's funny the way I chose to watch the film. I went to the Michigan State game. I tried to grab a game in the middle of the season when I started watching Jordan James, and that game featured 3 of his top 5 longest runs. So my initial impression of James was out of this world. But he's just one of those guys that, I don't know, just a smooth zone runner for me. I think in this draft cycle, I've been attracted to the guys. You mentioned Jeanty making things look easy. I think I've been attracted to the guy as much as I was talking about Devin Neal making these breathtaking plays. But some of the guys that just seem to get what's there and make things look easy. And I thought James did that as a zone runner. I think he's got a lot of that smooth gliding ability that really attracted me to his game.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to like about his running of the ball. I think his hands and his pass protection are a weakness, so I kind of wonder if he can play on third downs in the NFL. But as a 2-down player, he's got lateral agility. He's got great juke moves. He's got good vision, patience, balance, all those things. He's definitely got some dog in him as well, and runs the right way and runs with that violence and those things. I'm a little bit PTSD with the Oregon thing. Like, Oregon opened a lot of space for Bucky Irving as well, and I used that as a reason to knock Bucky Irving, and then obviously Irving goes out there and looks amazing. I'm like, okay, so it opened a lot of space for Jordan James as well, but maybe he's that good as well, and who cares? So I'm a little bit scarred by the Bucky Irving analysis that I don't know how much to rate Jordan James based off that, but there's definitely a lot to like about his tape.
I think the biggest thing that scarred us on Bucky was the bad workout. The same thing you cited about Devin Neal. It's like, oh man, this dude looks athletic and quick and fast on the field, much like Tez Johnson from Oregon, but the workout wasn't great for Bucky.
And I don't think Jordan James I don't think his workouts were amazing either. He was 4.55 40 time. Yeah, the 10-yard wasn't particularly good. The broad jump was under 10 feet. Like, again, he's another guy that's not a great athlete. So pure scar tissue when it comes to analyzing Oregon running back from the last 12 months.
We're at the point where I think all these running backs, it's what do they bring to the table versus, trusting them as every down backs or whatever. I think he's just a good, smooth zone runner. I like that about his game. He weird in the pass game, I think, as far as had a bunch of drops, but also had a really nice catch in traffic. So I think he's better than the drops might show in the pass game. Who had the when we talk about DJ Giddens like upset me in the pass game, the way he was dropping passes and unable to adjust to anything, even though I kind of liked him as a runner. I didn't hold the drops against Jordan James as much because I thought he showed, again, just like a smoothness to his game that I liked. But there's not a huge difference between him and some of the others on the list here, between 9 and 15 or whatever it might be.
Who was so who just missed out on your list? Who's like 11?
DJ Giddens from Kansas State. I know I've seen a lot of chatter about him in the chat. I think Giddens is really good. A lot of jukes, multiple jukes. He's just a jump cut guy. Jump cut, find what's there, slalom through the defense. That's his game. I think he's pretty good at it. Little high cut. Don't love him in the pass game.
Yeah. He was my Jarius Norwood comp.
There we go.
And interestingly, Josh Norris comped him to Tevin Coleman. So apparently Giddens can only be comped to Atlanta Falcons.
He's a type.
Yeah.
Type.
And I think they're both actually solid comps.
Coleman was like a 4.3 guy, wasn't he? Like he was really fast.
Yeah. But they both have wheels. But he's this sort of straight ahead runner, right? Like pretty tall, like he's 6 foot, 212 pounds, and runs upright. So he's this sort of tall, slender, explosive, straight line type of guy. I don't think his lateral agility or lateral movement is particularly good, but his straight line sort of speed, one cut type of ability, like he feels like one of those outside zone runners that can rely on that speed, cook people for pace. And yeah, like Jarius Norwood was 5'11", 205, so similar ballpark. I think Tevin Coleman is not in the similar kind of size range as well. He's really good at the second level as well. If you get him through to that space and he's running, he's very good. He can go. But I do think he's a little bit more scheme limited than some of these other guys.
Yeah, I think that's a good description. Like I don't have, he's at 11 for me. I think James, Harvey, Giddens, I have, they're similar, all similar spots. But I think, he's a fine zone runner. Ran 4.43. I think he's got some good stuff to his game. I could see people liking Giddens and liking him higher. I didn't like him in the pass game though, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few guys that are quite outside zone dependent or specific. I think he's one of them. And I think, obviously that's a Shanahan sort of system, right? Theoretically, but I don't know how many teams are desperate for those guys right now. There's more of those guys than there are schemes to fit them in, I think, this year, which gets tricky. My number 11 was Brashard Smith from SMU. I really liked his tape. Again, I was like, he's the guy, this happened with wide receivers as well, but the guy that's like just outside the top 10, you're trying to find some way of getting him in. Like I want him in my top 10 and I can't find the player that I want to drop out of the top 10 to put him in. But another kind of interesting story, like former wide receiver. So he's got 1 year of running back production, the 1 year at SMU. I think he'll be labeled as a third down back because former wide receiver, like it's just an automatic deal for a lot of people. He does have the elite receiver skills. Like you can see it, obviously really good. Like you can see the route running. You can see him, the way he snatches the ball out of the air with his hands. That's different for a guy that's played wide receiver than it is for a running back. I really liked his receiving skills, but I also think he's an effective runner inside. Can be a little slow reading it sometimes, but the dude played running back the first year this time, right? But remember Tyrone Tracy a year ago, similar thing, like running back convert. So he's a little slow reading it develop sometimes, but when he does, he's got great reactions. Like his kind of connection between seeing it and his feet moving is instant. It's really good. I don't think he has great power, but he's got pretty good power. And there was a play against Duke where he ran right over a 230-pound running linebacker at the goal line. When he lowers his shoulder, even at 196 pounds, he can deliver a hammer blow. Like he can deliver the boom. Really impressive speed and burst. He's got kick return experience as well. So you've got special teams bonus work to get him on the field. I really liked him. The one concern I had, other than the fact that limited experience, still working on reading it, et cetera, there were a lot of almost fumbles on his tape, right? It's like fumble numbers not terrible, but there was a play where he lost one mid-run and the ball just sort of bounced back to him And it's like, that's not a turnover, but it should have been. There was another one where he the ball's knocked out right after he broke the plane at the goal line. Like, he carries the ball a little bit fast and loose sometimes, which again, I think is a little bit wide receiver legacy as opposed to running back legacy. I would want to see him tighten up the ball security a bit, but otherwise, like, I think he can become
small hands. He's got small hands. That's why.
I don't think that's the problem. But I think he can become a 3-down back.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on. I wish I had him in my top 10. I like Brashard Smith quite a bit. I've been waiting months for you to get to Brashard Smith and hear your take after you liked Tyrone Tracy, the wide receiver conversion last year. Different style players, because I think Tracy's more of a pure running back already than Smith. But I'm with you. I thought he could be better at just pure running back reads. He's only had the 1 year. Like, SMU got him in the portal from Miami and said, "You're a running back now." And he was really productive and helped lead them to the college football playoff. I like him. I like Brashard Smith quite a bit. And it's not cliche to say, he's a pass game weapon too, because he wasn't a bad receiver either. I think he can catch the ball and he's smooth out of the backfield. A lot of times guys move off the receiver position like Tariq Woolen because he couldn't catch, so you had to make him into a cornerback. But like, Smith can actually catch the ball a little bit and run routes. I do think you have a really good pass game weapon in Brashard Smith.
Yeah, and I think, look, there's some power to that. Even if the guy isn't a good enough receiver to play wide receiver, he's still a plus receiver for a running back, which is what we're talking about now. Like, it's like when you moved, Ty Montgomery or Cordero Patterson. Like, maybe those guys aren't good enough at receiving to be a wide receiver, but if you put them in the backfield, they're better than almost any running back in the NFL. Like, that's the power of that sort of holdover ability. So I think Brashard Smith's receiving skills as a running back are immediately a massive plus, even if they weren't good enough to play wide receiver at college. And I don't know that's the case. But my thing is more, again, I think he will automatically be labeled as just a 3rd down scat back type of player because of that wide receiver history. But I actually think he's got the ability to be much more than that and become this 3-down player. Like, he doesn't have great power, but he's got good balance. He's able to fight his way through contact, reaccelerate really quickly. Like, he can run between the tackles, and particularly if his vision develops a little bit for that, because that's a totally new skill set for a wide receiver. If that part develops pretty quickly, like, he could immediately become a much better NFL player than he has been so far.
Yeah, Brashard Smith, his start-stop ability is fantastic. I also wrote down downfield ball security questions, so I think I saw some of the stuff that you saw. Yeah. He's another guy that likes to bounce it out, but again, I think his inexperience and the lack of wear and tear for Brashard Smith actually works in his favor here. So, he's a just miss guy for me as well. And if I might have my own buyer's remorse not putting him at 9.
I know. I wanted to get him.
I want to put everybody at 9. That's what I want to do. I want everybody at 9 now.
I couldn't find the guy I wanted to drop out. Him and Devin Neal, both very. I wanted both those guys in the top 10. Like, my top 10, I wanted to have 12 guys in it.
By the way, while we're talking about him, he did remind me, and I know you and I talked off air. So Jaden Blue from Texas, I don't love as a pure running back, but I like as a speed receiving back. And so Blue, I was picturing him before Geno Smith got traded. I was picturing Blue as a guy that you can use in the red zone, because I think a lot of the best red zone passing games have a running back who can win one-on-one and create some easy throws. I'm picturing Geno Smith firing balls into double coverage, thinking if Seattle adds Jaden Blue when Geno is there as a pass game red zone running back, it's a very specific thing. But either way, wheel routes against Ohio State. I think he runs the Texas route. I think he's really shifty. Ran in the 4.3s. Had to fire a highlighter over here. Jaden Blue, I like him as a pass game weapon who runs fast.
Yeah, I didn't love Jaden Blue. Like, a scat back type of deployment at Texas, uses a receiver a lot, motion to bubble screens, like used as a receiver in addition to force feeding him the ball. 5'9", 196 pounds. He was another guy. So we talked about this off air. His 40 time story is strange, and I don't know what to make of it. He was another guy that was talking about, I could break the record. I could run a 4.2 or whatever. 4.38 at the combine, right? So like Isaiah Bond, it's that looks a little bit silly. Apparently, at his pro day, though, he ran in the 4.2s, according to a lot of people. Now, every now and again you get these pro day times and somebody puts out the number like, reportedly ran a 4 whatever. And then everyone else comes out immediately afterwards and like, we didn't have that. We had it like a 10th and a half slower than that. This is just one rogue number. But a lot of people had 4 2s, not the same 4-2, but like different times in the 4 2s. But then Dane Brugler comes out and says at his pro day he ran a 4.38, like still the same combine time. Like, and Brugler tends to have these, like he's not just going with his one stopwatch, right? Brugler's tending to report either an accurate composite number or, you know, whatever it is. So I don't know what to make.
Get out of here.
You unmuted yourself there.
Thank you.
Yell behind your sheet of paper.
Really well done. Really well done, Steve. Forgot to press the button.
Anyway, I don't know what to make about his 40 time is what I'm saying. He's fast, but I don't know if he's 4.38 fast, which is, you know, plenty legit, or if he actually does properly have 4.2 speed.
Yeah, I thought he felt, I mean, either way, I thought he felt pretty fast. I don't love him as much as like a Brashard Smith. I thought just very specifically pass game running back for Jaden Blue. I don't think he's a very good pure running back, running through contact or any of that type of stuff. Any other names? Ollie Gordon, we probably should mention as a guy that's just been hyped as a, you know, top 10 running back, was hyped as much higher after a great 2023 season. Wasn't nearly as good in 24.
Yeah. So again, another guy that has that sort of slightly weird backstory of like his numbers the year before were insane. He had like a 1,700-yard season, 21 touchdowns, which almost completely fell apart this past season behind a terrible situation. So like, this is just, again, like an example of how much the situation around a guy can affect the production. He's just a big bruiser of a running back, 6'1", 226 pounds. I don't see the dynamism, the explosion, you know, strength and power is his primary asset, and he's good at it. He'll only be 21 on draft day as well. So there's some, you know, there's a sort of upside there, but I don't see, you know, I don't see special there.
Glad I could relate to so many people in the chat with the kids in the background here. We all do what we can. Since COVID, it's been, you know, far more acceptable to have kids running around and being crazy in the back.
Well, mine's now old enough that she's still asleep, so that works.
That's good. Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of Ollie Gordon relative to some of the others in the class. Any other name? Oh, so Bashal Tootin, I think we should at least mention, ran in the 4.3s, low 4.3s at the combine. My only problem with, so I like Tootin as far as what he does, right? I thought Virginia Tech played to his skill set really well, which is speed. Yeah. I don't think he's a great pure between the tackles type of runner. I think that limits him. But they ran, like, it felt like they were toss sweep, toss sweep, toss sweep. That's what they did, which is his game. So he has some big playability. So it's old school and cliche to say, hey, get this guy on the edge. But yeah, get Tootin on the edge, and he's really, really good.
Yeah, he's another guy. He's another one of those players we talked about it being like the classic outside zone players, you know, one cut runner, get him out in space, toss into space, get him moving laterally, use the speed, and then one cut, boom, go. So it's very boom or bust with him. Like, he had his 2 big seasons were like 50% breakaway runs. It's a huge number. Like, half of your runs are coming on those breakaways. That's pretty insane. 4.32 40. Really, really impressive athlete. But I do think he's very scheme specific. Like, interestingly though, like he reminded me a little bit of Isaac Garendo from a year ago. And Garendo obviously went to the 49ers. Now 49ers trade away Jordan Mason. Isaac Garendo is running back 2. Tootin could actually go to San Francisco and either it could be obviously McCaffrey is running back 1, but then Tootin and Garendo are running back 2 or 3 in some order. That actually does make some sense for him. Like, his short shuttle number was bad. He's a straight line, one cut speed runner.
And EC Everett in the chat was citing what I was going to bring up to the fumble issues. He had, I think it was 5 last year, 9 over the last 2 seasons. That's an issue for Tootin, but I'm with you, man. Like, I've been talking up all the players who do everything well and are subtly good, but I also have the soft spot for the 4-3-2 guy. You put him in the right situation. You think about how Miami has built their running back room with a whole bunch of 4-3 guys, and if you are good at scheming up, getting fast guys into space, you know, pick up Bashal Tootin and he'll be good. Anybody else you want to mention, Sam?
Yeah, who else we got? So That's all the guys that are at the top end of my list. I think Taj Brooks was kind of interesting as a player.
Yeah.
Texas Tech running back, 5'9", 214, crazy body type. Like another guy that was listed at like 230 or something, and then ended up being 214. But he like looks thick. Like he's a stout, wide body. He almost looks like, remember for a while before he like made it obvious, there was a sort of confusion as to whether Eddie Lacy was fat or just wide, right? And there was like the training camp, picture where it's like he's just turned at the wrong angle, and like it's a billowing jersey, and like he's not actually fat. And then he became really fat. It's like, okay, now he's fat. There's some plays like that where it's like, is he fat or is he just wide? He's just got a weird brick-shaped body. But he's got some wiggle for that size, like pretty elite change of direction numbers, 6'9", 3-cone, 406 short shuttle. Those are like legit numbers. I thought he's a good receiver as well, not just on checkdowns. Like there's a play where he's toasting somebody on a post route against, open middle of the field, split safeties, made the all practice team at the Shrine Bowl. A lot of mileage on the clock, though. He's had a lot of wear or tear over the last couple of years, but like he's a useful day 3 player to me, like decent vision, power, quickness. I liked a lot about what he brings to the table.
I think that's part of the depth of this class. Taj Brooks, Jarquez Hunter from Auburn. I know there's some fans of him. He didn't stand out to me. A straight line downhill, has some speed. There's some good day 3 type options in this class as well. I like the class. Do you like the class overall? I mean, You've talked up a lot of players here.
No, overall, I did. I thought it's deep. It's talented at the top. There's a lot of players there. Did you get to Marcus Yarns from Delaware?
Did not get to Yarns yet.
He was pretty fun. Pretty impressive production on like limited workload, but like legit athlete, 4.45, 1.55 10-yard split, really nice acceleration and burst. I would say that's his like superpower. A legit receiving weapon out of the backfield as well. Like they would target him deep down the field on wheel routes, on stuff out in space. He's got a really nice like hard cut in space to beat people one-on-one. Again, guys have him lined up and then foot in the dirt, and he's just gone straight by them. Pretty good balance through contact. Like doesn't necessarily always get through it, but he'll ride the contact for like another 5 yards of stumbling, which is always a positive thing. But another guy that's kind of, I felt like sort of straight line runner who's got some slashing cuts to him. Again, change of direction numbers were not great. So another guy that sort of falls into that wide zone bucket of slashing runner.
Last guy, let's talk about Donovan Edwards. Supposed to be one of the top guys a couple years ago. Weird career at Michigan where it felt like he was better early and was unbelievable in the national title game against Washington, and that's pretty much it over the last couple of years.
So kind of like a wide receiver running back hybrid almost. Like a lot of these manufactured touches, jet sweeps, decent speed, athleticism. I didn't like a year ago he was getting a ton of like Alvin Kamara comps, and that always sounded insane to me. They still sound insane to me. His career went backwards rather than forwards by staying in college. The other guy I would throw out there as a name to mention, LaQuint Allen from Syracuse. He looks like a wide receiver to me. Like he's 6 foot, 201 pounds, and looks like a wide receiver. Really like lean and lightweight, relatively tall, like literally more wide receiver shaped than running back shaped. I felt like the lack of heft showed up. Like he can be stopped dead on contact a lot. Almost felt like a wide receiver trying to navigate inside sometimes. But again, like he's got the receiving skills for it. I wonder if his speed limitations kind of impact what he can be. A guy that looks for space and kind of struggles when the space is not there.
Made some big plays for Syracuse this year, but I think he's a tick below some of the others on the in the class here. But man, I really like the depth. I like the depth in this class. I like the high end in this class. It really is. I think it's going to live up to the hype. This running back class.
Can we wrap it up with the X factor in all of this?
What's that?
The X factor at running back is Savion Williams.
So that's TCU wide receiver Savion Williams.
Yeah. Wide receiver. Look, the comp you're going to see every time you read anything about Savion Williams is Cordero Patterson, and it's difficult to get away from that comp. And I do want, look, eventually I feel like I feel like we discovered what Cordell Patterson was. It was just too late for him to actually maximize that impact. Eventually, teams just went, what if he's just a running back? They put him as a running back, and he was a good running back. But at that point, he was already pretty old, and he had a lot of mileage on the clock, and he carved out this role as, kick return specialist, etc. But I wonder if, like, day one, if the Vikings had just drafted him as a running back and said, you are now a running back, what his career would have looked like. So I'm kind of wondering, well, if we've learned the lessons there, what if we just say, what if Savion Williams is a running back? And I went looking. I was like, okay, I'm going to watch every carry from Savion Williams. Now, the problem is they didn't line him up as a running back. They lined him up as like a wildcat quarterback, effectively. And all of his runs were like,
QB
wide
sweep.
Zone.
QB sweep most of the time, right? Yeah.
No, it's like
pull,
QB sweep, like pin pull, these sort of fake concepts that aren't, real running back concepts. I went looking for like, what is this actual? Let me find a real concept here. There's like half a dozen plays. There's like 6 or something, right? It's insane.
True.
Now there are glimpses. We're talking about like literal glimpses. It's single digit sample sizes, but there are glimpses of he could do this, right? There's a 4th and 1. I forget who it's against, but like a 4th and 1 inside zone type of run where he sees the right gap to hit, then cuts to the space, bounces it outside of the second level, stiff arms a dude, who's coming in to fill, and scores a touchdown on 4th and 1 instead of just picking up the first down. It's really, really small sample sizes, but this guy has insane burst. 6'4", 220 pounds, Cordell Patterson sized. The burst is elite. The athleticism is elite. It's a total project, and that's why it's probably not going to work, whatever you ask him to do. But I do wonder if we just make the determination right now and we say, you are a running back, that's what we're working on. If Savion Williams has so much athleticism and potential athletically that he can become a really good player.
Let me just say this. We have heard reports that he's meeting with running back coaches on visits.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's doesn't mean it's exclusive, doesn't mean it's every team, but there is meeting with running back coaches. So there's at least teams thinking about this and considering it. The last thing I'll say too, yesterday, the rule change on the kickoff return that a touchback goes to the 35 now, not the 30. The goal there is to induce fewer touchbacks and more actual kicks in play. We said this last year, that puts a little bit more value on the kick returner with the new kickoff. I think that is added even more. And remember, just to remind people, the kick return game is more like a running back play. The punt return is more like a wide receiver play, skill set wise. So the running backs we're talking about today, any of those guys who can return kicks, read a block, read the blocking schemes of kick returns, those guys have added value. Throw Savion Williams into that mix as well.
He's the closest thing you're going to find to genuinely just drafting an athlete. The way college programs will just recruit an athlete. Like, this kid is an amazing athlete. We have no idea where he plays. We'll figure it out later. We just want him in the building. That's what Savion Williams is. I don't think he's a wide receiver. I don't know if he's a running back. What he's being asked to do, or what he was being asked to do at TCU, is so far divorced from anything he's going to have to do at the next level. But I'm drafting the athlete. Like, he is a special athlete, and I'm hoping I can figure out what to do with him, even if what to do with him is just make him a running back day one, the way teams didn't and probably should have with Cordell Patterson.
All right, man. We've touched on a lot of running backs and a wide receiver. Rocket Sanders, thanks for the shout out as well from the chat. Another sleeper, Raheem Rocket Sanders. Agree with that as another guy that I kind of like in this class. So look, deep running back class. Go back and look at all of our top 10s. Had some similarities, had some differences, and thought it was tough. I think it was tough between 8 and, 14, 15. There's a lot of backs to like in this class. Tomorrow, we're going to go team by team, talking team needs. And also one more reminder, I'm teaching a class on football analytics and telling stories with football data, smww.com. If you're interested, had some people ask about it, ask about the specifics. Telling stories with football data is the way I like to describe it. 8-week class, 1 hour a week, and some one-on-one time with Steve, smww.com for more information. Anything else, Sam?
No, the usual housekeeping stuff. We got a new studio in the works. Hopefully we'll get in there. I mean, we're getting, towards the draft. Maybe we'll get in before, maybe we'll get in just after, but eventually we will no longer be remote from the basements. basement/attic.
Benny and Toby, thank you over here for watching them as well. My apologies for my outburst at my children. I'm alive on air. Come on, kids. Get out of here. You know, you're not supposed to be here. But, you know, sometimes they break in. It is what it is. All right. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow. Team needs. Check the mic.